Geshe is just making his prostrations and we will get started. Good morning, everybody. Oh, yeah. So welcome everybody. Can you see and hear both Geshe and myself? Okay, wonderful. If there's any problems as we're streaming, please don't be shy to wave your hands or unmute yourself and let us know. So can you hear Geshe-la's voice clearly as well? Okay, great. So Geshe-la wishes Tashidele auspicious greetings to you all, wherever you are, whatever place you find yourself. He hopes that you are well and he hopes that you are happy. So we know that we are abiding in this place of cyclic existence or samsara, and we know that the nature of samsara is dissatisfaction, to experience difficulty. So our task really in a kind of gathering together is to try to clear those unwholesome causes, to purify those unwholesome causes, to address that problem. And we should also understand that the abode in which we dwell here in samsara, for example, in this human realm, this is the same realm that those beings who are now holy beings dwelled in. And it was dealing with these same problems, but working wisely and cultivating themselves that those holy beings were able to reach realization. And so in terms of what we have as a potential, it is this precious mind that we possessed. And that precious mind is something that is actually vast and powerful. So the other sort of side of this task is to develop compassion, karuna, for those beings, not just the small circle who are close to us that we have compassion for now, but to expand that circle of compassion and make it vaster and vaster to be able to encompass all beings. That's another task of our cultivation. And also, just to be clear, when we expand this circle of compassion to, for example, strangers, that doesn't mean that we have any less compassion for those who are close to us, right? We still have compassion for them. It's just we're expanding it to include more beings. And also we should understand that as this compassion becomes more encompassing for more and more beings, that actually the compassion for ourselves and the compassion for those close to us, that will only become more powerful and meaningful actually. So it was said that Lama Tsongkhapa, when he studied the text on logic known as the Pramanavataka by the great Indian Pandit Dharmakirti, that tears would spontaneously flow from his eyes. And so why were tears flowing from his eyes? It's not for an ordinary reason, like he was sad or something like that. This isn't why. It was the kind of tears that happen when joy is felt. So they were tears of joy that Lama Tsongkhapa was experiencing. So why did Lama Tsongkhapa have this emotional experience, have these strong feelings when looking at this text of the Pramanavartika? Because he saw that this text used reasoning to establish the practices of method and wisdom, and that through this reasoning that this text proposed, not only was liberation from suffering for the individual possible, not only that, but beyond that, full enlightenment for the sake of every last sentient being. So through these elegant reasonings in the Pramanavartika and also these interlinked reasonings that were layered sort of one upon the other, this very convincing argument is established for why liberation is possible, for why enlightenment is possible. And so the possibility for liberation, the possibility for Buddhahood or full enlightenment, the best arguments for the possible of this, you can find in this text on valid cognition, the Pramanavartika. So, So this is why the best scholars from the three seats, Sera, Drepung, and Ganden, they have this tradition of Jangguncho. Jangguncho is the winter debate, and it is actually this special text of the Pramanavartika that is investigated with sessions of the monks coming from all those different monasteries. I was saying to Geshe, we should mention also the nuns also have their Jangguncho these days as well. I think recently it was held in Nepal. And actually, Geshe says, really, it's maybe like just kind of like a cultural thing, but really actually anyone is open to come and debate the scholars at the Jangguncho. Cholong Dangsu? Chidrak Dang Chuklong. Yeah. Sorry, Cholong Chibolam. So Dharmakirti and his student, through composing these treatises on valid cognition, not only did they establish these impressive reasonings, but it is also said that the holders of the non-Buddhist schools, so the other Indian systems of spirituality, they were also able to make sort of a great improvement in their logic. So as a first step, we want to be able to bring forth the topics of the teaching in our minds. So as a first step, let us place our mind and body in a state of calm. So we're going to use two, I guess, analogies to try to make the meditation meaningful for people today. The first is we think like a flock of birds in the sky. They glide freely without sort of maybe going in a particular direction. And so we should understand that one of our principal mistakes is not understanding that any dharma, any phenomena that we point to, it does not have an inherently existent essence, even though it appears to. But because it has an appearance of inherent existence to our untrained mind, grasping at that appearance is what compels us into negative actions and, in short, what causes us all types of problems. So that is sort of one way to think about that flock of birds just gliding, letting the air take them through the sky. And the other analogy that we can think of is of the mind as like a vast, vast ocean. So we'll experience a lot of difficulties in our practice because of our limited mind, because of our narrow-mindedness, and establishing this vastness for that reason can be beneficial. So when we talk about the mind being vast and calm like a great ocean, what does that mean? We know that the ocean, it has all kinds of fish and sea creatures beneath its surface, but those fish and sea creatures, they do not disturb the ocean when it is calm. Similarly, there may be waves and so forth when the wind is blowing, but when it dissipates, that state of calm is restored. So what we want to do is we want to tap in to this vast, calm essence of the mind. And we want those projecting thoughts, right? We want those discursive thoughts to be just like fish under the surface of the water that aren't going to disturb that state of calm. So for those more experienced in meditation, we can take the challenge that as soon as the distracting thought arises, we try to stop it completely. So this is one approach, but that might be difficult. Another approach is just to step back and be like the silent observer and just see those minds arising and falling away, just like we would watch the television or a movie or something. So let us begin this meditation by placing our body and mind in a state of relaxation. Think the four elements within me are in balance. With the balance of those elements, then the channels and the wind, the prana, can flow free. If I step back from these unwholesome or distracting thoughts that are arising and just observe, I can let the nature of the mind carry me, just like a flock of birds glides through the sky on the wind current. There is nothing pinpointable, nothing findable at all. At first, it might seem that these unwholesome feelings or thoughts, they appear to be stable. They appear to really exist. But if we just observe and see them fall away, we'll see there's nothing pinpointably existent there at all. Those distracting feelings or thoughts, they're just like particles of water in the sky with the sun's heat and warmth. They dissolve away and clarity is restored. Similarly, the object of distraction that projecting mind is going towards, just like the thought itself, the object also lacks inherent existence. There is no pinpointable essence. Because these thoughts lack solidity, because their objects lack inherent existence, they are just like that fish beneath the surface of the ocean. They cannot disturb its calm vastness. They will fall away. Because when we experience problems of body or mind, we tend to grasp at and solidify them. Those problems become more stronger causes of suffering, but actually there is nothing solid to point to at all. From touching the mind's vast and calm nature, I want to direct it to realization, to realize the final mode of abiding of objects. In other words, to see things as they really are. Let us make requests to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas to realize that. So we'll recite the chanting. I just want to adjust the sound to make sure that it will carry through. Tönpa chomden de Sheba chompa yanda bar zobe sangye Sheba dan shab sudenpa Sheba jiten Kalo gyurwa lana meba lana mi namgi temba sangye chomdende Gyawa Shagya Dubala Chazelo Jede Gyatsu Tenpa chomden de deshin sheba drachomba yandaba zobe sanje reba dang shasu tenpa dewa sheba shiten chemba chebu duwe kalo jowa lana mepa ladam ni namgi tenpa sangye chomden de pe jawa shakya duba la chaze lo chede gyatsu ji Tenpa chomden de deshin sheba drachomba yandaba zobe sanje reba dang shasu tenpa dewa sheba shiten chemba chebu dewe kalo gyurwa lana meba lana mi namgi tenpa sangye chomden de pe jawa shakya tuba la chasero chede gyatsu ji Short mandala offering. So ji jo ji me ram ri ram ri ni de gen bari sangye jindu me de buwan Jogu nama dajim chebarjo idam guru ratna mendala niryatayami. And the last prayer is refuge and bodhicitta. Chedan sogi chenam la jangcho bardo dani kyausu chi dagi chenye gibe sonam gi jola penjir sangye jobar sho Chedan sogi chenam la jangcho bardo dani kyausu chi dagi chenye gibe sonam Jola benje songye joba sho songye chedon soge chenam la chanjo padu dani kyausu chi dagi chenye gibe sonongye jola benje songye joba sho
뭐야, 다 나로서 아니 나 세야돼도 다 단단 멀리티 같은 내가 야쇼 때 내가 야쇼 때 하고서라 뭐 차수 해야 될라 다 생제 요zul을 뱀반되게 생제 요zul을 대시 그거 늘서 맞아 다제 도쇼들레스.
So, in order to actualize, in order to kind of bring forth the very best aspect of that we call the self, or that we call the I, we need to think how I want all sentient beings to be free from suffering. Gonda di younger
소소
sorry.
놈도 가오잖아. 지금 많이 저는 내가 야쇼 다 고시 차수 해둬야 되라.
Yes, yes,
세제
sorry.
요즘 다 지금 되게 깔래 가는데.
Yeah, yeah.
오늘 세트 강갈 뱀반되게 강갈 대시 되게
So
선바다.
to bring forth the maximum potential of that we call the self, the I, and that we call my mind, the best way to do this is to think that all beings must be free from suffering. They are close to me. Therefore, may I realize their benefit. This is the first step to sort of reaching our potential.
다 덴디지에서 오늘 집에 전번에 소원스 지어봐이나 다 되게 좋아도 사서서 끼어봐 소서 니에 짜지 못 쓰게 돼요 끼봐 강가 좋아도 용이가.
And actually, if we have this thought of benefiting others in our mind stream continuously, not only will we be happier, those close to us will be happier, and indeed, all beings that we encounter will be happier.
어땅에 니바 첨어지로 아니 토니라. 어산 좀블리가 강에 차수 매봐서 그도 소마치 니도 첨어 가세레스 마데.
And because somebody who really says, I want to tap into my potential so that I can benefit all beings and lessen the world's problems, think about the sort of courage and determination someone has when they possess that aspiration.
소소 강에 이나 좀블리 강에 노노 요아르마 매바레면 디와스.
Yeah. And also, it's not that you don't get any benefit, because also if you are trying to reduce the problems in the world, are you not an inhabitant of this world? So through helping others, you are helping yourself as well.
대려마다 다 소소도 소소 니에지고 소노토네 다 마세 코로 깔레자 되바 이나 다 버티디오 되노 지치제 되게 와스. 이네잖아.
So
다 던로 되지.
yeah. So, so many of us, we are kind of focused on our own happiness and maybe the happiness of our immediate family or close circle of friends. And so we put so much effort, don't we, into working to kind of achieve our happiness and maybe that of our family. But the scope here is something that is quite limited.
저절로 다다 멀리야 같은 야 샤데진 디와스. 어다 공부도 되지 대사르지 좋아도 던디 피엔 강에 치는 그 삼백에 드는 건 가능해 봐서 그렇지.
Because even the animals can do that. They can take care of themselves and their near and dear ones. And actually, sometimes it seems like certain animals, they have more affection for their children than some human beings do. If you look at how animals are willing to risk their lives to protect their young, the sort of difficulty that a bird goes to construct a nest for its babies and so forth.
어다 어떤지래. 어다 던디지다 단다 던디지는 뭐 차소 생제 차소 로아리 주고 생제 요조 손을 또 돈은 당연히 내봐 것이야.
So when we have an aim that is for the benefit of not just all human beings, but all sentient beings, all 6 types of beings within samsara, that is how we can utilize the mind's vastness to touch that potential.
다시 또 막간가 다 던지지니야 하고 살아와 이나 소지나를 지스 드라마 이나 코러스 또 망아주도 지바렌데 테네 다 칠칠도 코러스 간디실렌.
So actually, we understand that the enlightened beings, the Buddha, Mother Tara, all of these beings, they started out exactly the same as us, perfectly ordinary. But through establishing these aims and making their minds vaster and vaster, they were eventually able to reach the state of supreme enlightenment.
다 던지지는데 사 던지지사 다 던지기 사회의 용주를 그게 편바르게 사회 자치기사 거의 셀을 용하셔 말려고 요.
So because this seed that we're planting is a seed to be able to actualize and benefit all sentient beings, we understand that the task of planting something so precious is not necessarily going to be easy. And why is that? Because when we try to plant these seeds, due to habituation, there's many obstacles in our mind that are going to prevent it from taking root or sprouting.
어다 개자 못 하게 되어서 어다 드리지 이사들 알레세 류마티가 뭐다 레레 진 봐줘야 is.
So let us try to plant these seeds, and as a first step, we will put our mind in a neutral state of equanimity.
소노 야가도 누가 다 가르 이네 니까지 걸어 보겠. 파지 잡아 이는 뭐세들 레레 자야지 되어서.
Whatever thoughts that arise, whether wholesome or unwholesome, just set them aside. And through sort of putting thinking aside, the mind will have a quality of stillness.
간에 지키게 세도 너도 가르 이나요 자자지. 예만노지 발라노지 파인도요 somebody.
I think whatever unwholesome thoughts or feelings that are arising that are disturbing the mind, they don't need to remain there. They can just be like waves of the ocean that crest and then subside.
대용 세 소아 첨보 먹이비토네 세대. 아니 위라이 위 중에 로라이 is.
So think that let us take the mind and place it to kind of relax those thoughts and feelings. Let us place our awareness, our mindfulness on the rising and falling of the breath. Breathing in, I'm aware I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I'm aware I'm breathing out.
다 든지게 세 유마데가 세 야보테 리가보 츠마노지 콜 치시 가보 말에 다 마보데 세보가르 야바이나 세 자쇼쇼 고 츠마치디 와스.
So we now can use this mind as a tool, because the mind in its neutral state, in the state of equanimity, is just like a piece of perfectly white cloth. Whether we want to dye it yellow, whether we want to dye it blue, this now becomes much easier.
다 든지지 이사 든지 세 야보테 로지 강갈로 프게 대시 유야가 다 추실판 트위 소바지.
So I think I want to take that mind and imbue it, lead it in the direction of thoughts which are able to contribute to the happiness of both myself and others.
롱레 예메다 모두 단도 설로 따와 이나요 다 녀자 침보치 마도 다 녀정이네 저기 코로미네 지중네 소바지.
Self and others, human, animal, all beings, there is not one that is my enemy. I am connected and close to all of them.
미네 지세야 보시나 요소 누가 설은 저거 수가 이나 니가게 대시 타두게 대시 요사 다 시주주랜도 소바지.
And think also, I'm just repaying the kindness because there's not one being that I can point to and say that they've never contributed to my temporary or ultimate happiness. Everyone has possibly contributed.
저는 가디 이나요 딱 코알 데네 까메 텐 저거만도 대이사다 대시 타두질 저기 뒤에다 말어서 로로서서 다야 존재세마도 순위 짜도 가서 이
As long as these beings who have shown me kindness remain within samsara, within cyclic existence, they will continue to experience the same difficulties. Therefore, I must lead them to ultimate peace, the state of final happiness. To do that, I must traverse the bodhisattva path and reach full enlightenment, Buddhahood, bring forth bodhicitta. On the basis, on the foundation I have with this human rebirth, I can definitely achieve that aim. So we'll pause there. So the motivation is so important, as Geshe has always mentioned, and the motivation that we just meditated on is the supreme one. And the motivation is so important because a poisonous seed leads to poisonous tree and branches, right? A medicinal seed leads to a medicinal tree and branches. And in order to be able to plant that seed in the best way, and also to be able to improve on it, just like adding fertilizer and water, then we will turn to the explanations within our text, the explanations on the commentary on the 7-point mind training. Again? Ale. So remember, right, that if we feel that the text is something far away from us, if we just kind of listen passively and don't try to integrate it as something related to our mind, right, it's going to be very difficult to make progress. So we want to really kind of make the text real. This text was composed, every single word was composed with helping us to reach and activate the mind's potential, helping us to develop our love and compassion. Every word was written to enhance our wisdom. This was the motivation. So, we want to be a little bit fearless, and Geshe was just mentioning the example of, like, if you put like a very small child, right, a very small child in any type of environment, their reaction isn't going to be fear. They're going to have a sort of an attitude of wonderment, right? They're going to be curious. Ale, pugu chinchin yapo rebes, madebe. Pugu chinchin kawishana de nikoronso temo yapu tagidua. Sorry. Okay. Sorry, I understood that the childlike thing is what we're supposed to aspire to, but Geshe is saying that actually no. In this case, the childlike quality isn't something to aspire to, because the point that's being made here, normally, right, it is a positive thing in text, but the point that's being made here is a child can't differentiate between what is unwholesome and what is wholesome, right? What is safe and what is dangerous in their environment. So we don't want to be like that. My apologies. Yeah. But of course, His Holiness often mentions the childlike mind as something beneficial, right? Because the mind is pure, it's not hardened or prejudiced, it's open to everything, right? So sometimes it's used as a positive example as well. A small child usually doesn't differentiate between friends and enemies. A small child usually isn't prejudiced. It has an attitude of friendliness, of wanting to play with everyone, right? So in that aspect, it's a positive thing. But of course, sometimes we see that what happens is, as children grow up, they do start to learn those prejudices, and they do start to learn those differentiations. And actually, as they get older, from the spiritual point of view, they become more unwholesome, right? Of course, there's exceptions to that, but in many cases, they become more unwholesome.
당연히 지는 보고 출시갈 세요 받는 것이 강가 정무제로 나오지 강가 끼워서 제로 받아보지 저토바도 tembo 되는 간이야 버려서 이제나.
But this attitude the child has of open mindfulness and playfulness, this attitude that they have that all those that they encounter are their friends, right? That is something that we can learn and try to incorporate into our own life.
그래서 어디서 근디가 다다이나이 다 로타도 가와이나이 칠라 마템비가 다 버게 좀 봐도 이제 어다 대치간세 듣다 야지고 그들이서 어디서 되는 was.
And so those universal human potentials, this is why His Holiness the Dalai Lama speaks so much about human values beyond religion, ethics beyond religion, right? Because those seeds of love and compassion can be developed by everybody.
어다가 어디래 다 산성간도 가war래 열서는 가서 빼는 놈버체 용바진 걸 맞서 시험바이나.
Yeah.
하고서라 아니 뭐지 때서 신호야레스.
Yeah.
뭐니를 신호야마레스.
So remember we had the example, just to touch back on what we talked about last week, we had the example of a crazy elephant, and sort of witnessing that crazy elephant were three people. One was fearful and two were not.
다시는 메케텔 야가지 누가 주인인도.
And remember that those who were not fearful, there was the lack of fear in the positive sense and a lack of fear in sort of a negative sense.
다 던지지자 다 내서 체는 뭐시키지나. 하고서라 그내서 신경매도 그 신호야 말이스.
So in the didugadirwa, so in the negative sense, it was the one who was just kind of ignorant. Because of that unknowingness, they didn't realize the kind of danger that they were in. Yes, please feel free. Yeah.
다 할래비 다 보게 lumbo친 로또 다 차수 시기지나. 그 신호야 말이 긴 lumbo친 요다 가르치시는 내가서 신호야 왔어.
The other one, he or she lacks fear in the positive sense. It is because of knowingness, knowing that whatever behavior that the elephant displays, they have the means to be able to pacify that.
어다 빼된 노지 나로서 치 강가 노와 노지 요아레 손비손세 때자 요아 말에 세네다.
So in terms of our unknowingness, right, one of the main ones is thinking that objects exist in exactly the way that they appear, that they exist in the same way that they appear to. But the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, the holy beings, are saying that actually objects do not exist in the way they appear. If we look for a pinpointable essence, we will not be able to find it. And it's important to understand that that's not saying that they don't exist at all, right? There is a difference here.
So,
and also when we say that we call the I, or that we call the self, is not truly existent, some people might have a little bit of fear and say, oh, there's no I or no self that's there at all. Yeah. So, but we have to understand that the body and the mind, if we think about a person, the sort of foundation stone of the person is this conception of mikto di karere nga seredi, is that conception of the I, that conception of the self. This is like the foundation stone of the person, yeah?
Yeah.
But when we talk about selflessness, we talk about the selflessness of persons, right? The selflessness of the I. So what does this mean? So when we say selflessness, then, if there is that nominal self that's the foundation stone, what do we mean when we say selflessness? Selflessness in this sense is countering this conception that there is a completely independent, stably existing self that is not depending on causes and conditions. That's what the selflessness is refuting.
지포스 늘저 야 로니 잡아이나 신송
Mhm.
하고서와
Mhm.
건조 따다 대 더그러와스
Loso.
지판도서는 이대오 코리로 그러와스
Loso.
신송 디따
Ale.
신송
Yeah.
신송
Aguson.
야자바이나
Yeah.
되니 가르노도
Yeah.
가와 하고서와 오자바이나 녀도 대 더긴도 와스
Mhm.
오다 치카르이나요
Mhm.
지지를 땜받던지 지레스
So we need to understand this relationship of dependence. The example that Geshe is giving is if you have 3 sticks, you can point those sticks upwards into kind of a triangle, and those sticks will stand up. But if you take 1 stick out, the whole thing collapses. In the same way, right? Selflessness is showing that self arises in dependence upon certain causes and conditions, and that when you take those away, then the arising of the self is not possible.
오다 된다 치카르이나요 코로 집어 대 둬야지요 말에 지질 땜바마도
So any phenomena that we point to is necessarily the same principle applies. It cannot exist in and of itself. It can only exist in dependence on other factors. This is the point here.
리송아 오다 던지지 이자 다 던지 골라요 마템바지 매바텔라 나매 시가 되는 그냥 코멘토
So when we say selflessness, the selflessness is saying that there is no self that is completely dependent, existing from its own side, not connected to causes and conditions. This is very important.
오다 던지지 매바 이자 짠이 라야 매 아사디 그렇게 되레스
Because that's how it is, if we try to look for some pinpointable independent essence, we will not be able to find it.
오다 디니 마노는 던지대에서 지체는 리라버다 또야도 리라워요 말와스 디세 뭐뭐 그렇게 된다 로토데 리라워요
So to kind of think through these stages of reasoning and develop a rough understanding, this is definitely something that's possible. Realization, that's something else, right? That's effort over a long period of time. But to have a general idea of this, Geshe really thinks is quite possible.
나이나레 고자이나레 코 요바이자 할리 네스메테스 켄자지 요바이자 롱지지메
So the I, the self, the phenomena that we point to, because it exists, because it arises, it necessarily lacks inherent existence. It necessarily lacks independent existence. That's the paradox.
요바이자 질 띠바레 땜바레
If it's there, it necessarily is arising in dependence upon other factors.
요바이자 질 띠바이자 질 마티바테 만두
Because it arises dependently, it cannot arise in and of itself. It doesn't come forth independently.
질 마티바테 매아이자 롱지지 만두
Because it does not arise independently, it is not naturally existent. It does not exist inherently.
메코라 따다 자두 시가르마도 요아이자 롱지지 요 말에 할레비 켄자지 요 알시데
So we have to know how this reasoning unfolds. Otherwise, if we say because it exists, it doesn't exist inherently, or it doesn't exist truly, that seems really incongruous, right? It won't make any sense. So we need to kind of go through these steps.
미네존은 지체치가 돌아 요아이자 지체인데 요아네 잘 로가라 와스텐도금도
Yeah. Age?
미네존은 지체텔라요 코 요아이자 지체인들이 요아네 잘라가라 텔라금도 와스 요아이자 롱지지 요 말에
Yeah, so usually we do kind of like positives, right? But in this kind of logic, we are using a lot of negatives, which can be confusing at first. It seems incongruous to say it exists, therefore it's not truly existent, right? When you hear that right away, it seems kind of contradictory.
단에서 던지지 요아이자 땡데도 뚱바니 디지 버겐용도 내 둬야 돼 하고서는 용도 내 둬야 돼 때에서 리라고 매아이자 라마조가 니가 지가 땡디지 하고서 때는 시금매 하고서 뭐야
To understand the union of emptiness and dependent arising, in other words, to be able to understand how things lack inherent existence precisely because they are dependent arisings, is something that is not so easy to penetrate. And that is why Lama Tsongkhapa said that when he understood the relationship of dependent arising and emptiness, initially he did not teach it because he sensed beings were not ready. We only see that actually much later, sort of in his teaching career, did Lama Tsongkhapa teach on this in depth. Similarly, when the Buddha first achieved enlightenment, does anyone remember for how long he didn't preach the Dharma? It was 49 days, right? He said, there is this nectar-like Dharma which I have found, but there are not disciples suitable to receive it. Same sort of reason that he was initially silent. So it's really important to understand this relationship, how things exist because of their lack of inherent existence, and how because they are not inherently existent, they also exist. So being able to kind of understand and penetrate how this is really functioning, this was the sort of realization that unfolded Lama Tsongkhapa's composing in praise to dependent arising, right? Which was the text we were covering earlier in the year. Oh, we get to open the text now. All right. So for those of you who are following, I believe we are on page 10. Yeah. So we are on page number 10, outline 2, the practice of purifying negative actions. So just remembering the possibility of change, Geshe is mentioning that in Nagarjuna's letter to a friend, he says that even one who from a very young age was heedless, right, was careless, if they later establish heedfulness and mindfulness, they are like the moon unobscured by clouds. Dawa re nimar? Huh? Dawa ro? Yeah. Okay. Dawa. I just wanted to make sure it was moon and not sun, because last week, remember, I was like moon and sun, but no, this time it is the moon. No, it wasn't. Not Geshe-la's mistake, my mistake. Just want to be safe. Yeah, so sort of any negative action, right? The first step really is to reflect on that action and to develop some form of regret, right? Regret is something with real regret, there comes some benefit actually. If we look at so many beings in this world, and really the source of so many problems is that not only do they not regret their negative actions, they actually rejoice in those negativities, and that causes so many difficulties. So there are, in the teachings on Semdang Semjung, so mind and mental factors, there are kind of 52 that are proposed. And most of these are categorized as either wholesome or unwholesome, but 4 of these are said to be changeable between wholesome and unwholesome. One of these is regret. One of the changeable ones. One of them is sleep. So out of these 4 that can be either wholesome or unwholesome, one of them is regret, the other is sleep.
다 tuba
Yeah.
tuba de jeba se ni ya
Tokpa dang?
jeba
Jeba sana?
je dago pa ya de jang jo da je
Oh, right. I didn't so much on the neck of today.
ya te ji ni me la ni te ja de da de la de was ye le dai se ni ya res ji shi da ji ni da
Yeah.
ji ra ji ni da.
So there's also other minds that are engaging with the objects and looking at chikarakpa chik tamoredes and looking at a coarse and a subtle way. So those are the other of these four. But connected with our topic today, it out of these four changeable ones, it is the regret and sleep that are important. So if we did something bad yesterday and we have a mind of regret for that, this is regret that is considered wholesome. If we did something good or for example, generous yesterday, but then we come to regret it the next day, this is regret that is unwholesome. And sleep is changeable because we know that in the moments before we fall asleep, if the mind is in a negative or unwholesome state, then the sleeping period becomes an accumulation of what is unwholesome. If the mind is in a positive, beneficial state before we fall asleep, then the accumulation during sleep becomes something wholesome or positive. So then kind of connected with this, then we have practices of accumulation and purification. Purification is often from the perspective of these four opponent powers, and accumulation of merit is connected with the seven limbs or seven branch practice. And actually, in terms of purification and these four opponent powers, these are ways of thinking or principles that can be applied by anybody. You don't necessarily need to be Buddhist. Yeah. So the first of these is this mind of regret, regretting the negative action. And it is said that actually we have four opponent powers, that the subsequent three, these are going to be successful when we practice them based on whether we can get this regret in place properly or not. So it is said that if we can regard the fault, if we can regard the negativity that we accumulated as like having taken some poison, then immediately, right, we will want to seek out an antidote. So if you were to drink poison, think about how desperately you would seek an antidote. It's that sort of sense of urgency. If you knew that there was poison in your body, you certainly wouldn't be able to kind of sit back and relax and eat your dinner, right? You would be very much more preoccupied with trying to find an antidote or something to purify the poison. Negative karma is the same in a way, because we know that when the unwholesome karma is accumulated, it can only lead to a negative future result. It's only a matter of time. So we really want to clear that away. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama remarked that when we think about the legal system in this world, there's a lot of room to find a good lawyer or maybe pay a bribe or do something to sort of not have to meet the punishment for whatever action it was you did. But Karma is not like that, right? The cause that is accumulated cannot be manipulated. It leads to a result if we don't purify.
어다 내 체주 간디시 여보사요는 소소근 지고 대왕이야래 어 냠바가 내 체주 간디시 사요는 다 대체서 전로는 강에데 소소뉴야는 막 전도 질때야면
So the positive, wholesome things that we accumulate, this necessarily is going to lead to a good, positive result of happiness. And similarly, the negative things that we have done, this is going to lead to a result of suffering. We can't accumulate the karma and then give the result away to somebody else. That's not how it works.
어다 내서 던디 돈을 쉬고도 마치 수디와스 나라더니 고잘 뒤치 큰 녀모 가디 용을 따야마도 내가 메스
Ah,
쉬고도 마치 뭐지가
those-
닌 뒤치 큰 녀로 고살라
oh yeah, right, right,
고살라
right.
녀모
right.
가디 용을 따야마도 내가 메스
Right. So remember, we had the analogy of the Lama who said that really my only kind of task in this life is to hold the stake of mindfulness at the door of the mind to be sure that the afflictions do not enter.
我大概这么我们的，等于是在里边来看的，一起呢，就把找不些说那谈了他，咖哩，安尼，那么升级比多是呗，
Yes.
是吧？
Yeah, di number sinjip
那么
ito.
升级比多，
Number
就带到咱其实其实是，
So this mind of regret actually, chikla mandigirve.
这个是个好了，
So I asked Geshe if it's okay if I share something with you, because when you look at the four opponent powers in a lot of the literature that is given in English, it's just given as regret. But that's actually not the Tibetan term for the first power. The first power is Nampa Sunjimpeto, the power of complete eradication. So Geshe was saying that this regret is what allows us to eradicate the negative karma completely. So you don't know how that makes sense unless you know that this first power is actually called the power of complete eradication.
他那么说个，他想做这些点子多点这些年家给我要的，他得切我要嘛，是等到做点不一面的，但那点路去玩的，等到。
Yeah. And so then the next one, and Geshe said, so the first one is always in place there, but then some of the subsequent ones, the order will change depending on the Lama who is teaching, but it doesn't really change the meaning. The next one is called the power of the basis through which we can purify.
他等于在去大概的年报的结巴是写个的，他点年报的阿拉么才第几个是吧？他才投了大概的，他从进来的年报先进来点比他年报那么大，开始经常都写完来查的，这就刚刚投大投下来。
Ah, correct.
但是年报找不写说呢，
Yeah.
他但是阿拉那个记是吧？
Yeah.
比较，
我
我有他开始那么有没有打过嘛是吧？
And when we're contemplating the faults and developing this mind of regret, hopefully another realization that arises is like, this is one mistake that I did today or this week or whatever. But similarly, in regards to holy beings and ordinary beings in the past, I've also accumulated many similar unwholesome karmas.
他等于在电视看个去准备图呢，等于就把找不写图呢，那么升级吧，现在别人等于俺都是破坏进来度假去呢，
Yeah.
干嘛收入去吧呢？
Yeah.
升级吧差的。
Yeah. So Geshe was saying that if we are able to develop regret, not just for that action, but for all negativities that we've accumulated, that's why that regret is called the power of complete eradication, because it is said to be such a powerful regret that if we think about the negativities as water in a cup, it's just like spilling that cup upside down. Everything is eradicated, cleared away.
这什么？我等这说，他得要不许呢，他等着多，他我那年报用啥七个生意嘛的嘛，在牙下送进了对面年报去，马上进了对面年报你有啊？
So then the next one is the power of the basis. And we look at this one from the perspective of the basis on which we accumulated the unwholesome karma. And here there's only two broad categories that are given: on the basis of the Buddhas, the holy beings, and on the basis of sentient beings.
我打电东西去，等你呀，这什么？我打送进来对面地方的想着开始比到不高你在去吧，因为他做嘛差不多的是。
And so the negativity accumulated on the basis of the Buddhas, the holy beings, this can be purified through a practice of refuge.
他设计了对面地方上报过，你这个，他等于今天他做设计就设了哇。
And the negativities that we accumulated in relation to other sentient beings, the antidotes to this are meditating on love, compassion, and bodhicitta.
대요 때니 라요 바 베도 좀아서야 던지게 체대 있는 다 와서 이너레 지금 돈바서 체내 이너레 다 개와 공 사바데 다 돈도 야레스 년비도.
And so then the next one, the third one, is the power of the antidote. And this can be a particular practice that we do to counteract the negativity, an accumulation of merit. We perhaps recite praises to the holy beings. We recite mantras of purifications, make offerings and so forth, and dedicate to that purification. These are all examples of the power of the antidote. This is a broad category. And it's also said that really for purification, actually reciting the Prajna Paramita, the sutras on the perfection of wisdom. So for example, this shorter one, the Heart Sutra, this is a very powerful way to purify. Oh, the younger Sundani, the Avakovas.
손지게 치셰비가라 다리 차소 저사와체 고주열 타니월레 비갈 디도 드리고 바치 뭐
알레
어서서 라이비디라서 봤더니 내가 뭐뭐지레 다 총바가 돈내나 오 다용 디도 데지 내바시소나 하고서로 생제 뭐뭐지레 배도 년도가서 드니기 셰셰근도 뭐뭐 쇼네라
So there's a story actually when the Buddha was approaching a place and he was going to give a teaching, but then the deity Brahma, through his clairvoyance, he was able to perceive that there were many kind of hindering beings. I'm not sure, spirits or something like that, but many sort of hindering beings that were around. And he thought, oh, you know, this would be really a shame if those hindrances prevent the Buddha from being able to speak the Dharma and benefit those beings. So it is said that Brahma, thinking what he should do, he decided to recite one of the perfection of wisdom, the Prajna Paramita Sutras. And upon that basis, the obstacle was able to be cleared away.
So any type
of obstacle that you are experiencing, whether it is a temporary obstacle or an ultimate obstacle, you know, one of the supreme sort of antidotes to clear those away, to purify those negativities, is the recitation of the Prajna Paramita Sutras. Kali sundangen kechi pekyo puterin.
Shombadoni jesel kali.
Lela poresine hali pekyo puinsa amcho tetsan.
Shombadoni jesel kali repasatu wasi.
Ale.
Senza kecha karashena. Shito kabaso mal.
Ale.
Shombadoni jesel selina gomba yina.
Yeah.
So dela tembinya pati nyuri dekale re.
Kale marine sikale pekyo putrogi santes kale. So Geshe said that also the antidotes of love and compassion, right? These take all sentient beings as their basis, and then therefore certainly any negativity that we accumulated connected with those sentient beings can be completely purified. And so the principle, right, between these different kinds of antidotes and also the power of the basis is that we fall, if we fall down on the ground, we have to push ourselves up on the basis of the ground. So what we accumulated the negativity in relation to, that is what we should purify connected with. And so then we've covered three. So we did the power of the regret. We did the power of the basis. We talked about the power of the antidote. So this takes us to the fourth one, which is the power of turning one's back on the fault. Sometimes people call it power of the promise. And if we've had that regret in place from the beginning, right, then by the time we reach this fourth one, saying that I'm not going to do that negativity again, this becomes much easier to bring forth in the mind, doesn't it? And so you know, maybe you can do it for a fixed amount of time or something. There was one Lama who said, when we come to the end and we turn our back on the fault, we make the promise that I'll never do it again. sometimes we know that we're going to do it again, so that would be dishonest. So we just say we'll do our best. So that was the approach that one teacher took. Yeah. Yeah. So of course, like when we come to this point, we restrain ourselves to what's possible, right? There might be realistically a doubt that I'll never ever do that again. So we can consider that. Yeah. So a lot of the lamas say, you can do it for increments of time, so this type of negative action I won't do today or this week or this month. Otherwise, if we kind of have like this full knowledge that because of our habits, we're most likely to do it again, and we make that promise in front of the holy beings, that can actually become dishonest, which is not a good thing, right? Yep. I'm thinking to Geshe that we didn't actually read the text, so just so you can get the transmission, I'd like him to read the text. Yeah.
Dungan the mena gate nyombe somba njui ti cheche dungan mendechi dewan dena dei je so so shibi da yin nyomba shiba lama to kenju gi chewa gende jinye ko jumbo go toma la soba nona linga yisin je goni so so pa la mena chandro seshe shade lama kenju la mendra pa la soba twa da ta ni soba twa da ta ni twa da na wa shinje la siba shinje la chewa shinje la
Dimare. Tinga songa ma droya di. Nga so de nyampo tobji gi sik droma so. Di segi. Yeah, sorry, Geshe is reading what we did yesterday. I think it's the four opponent powers. Yeah.
Jawanipa dipa jwana che dunga mendena dunga che dipa ponshi pe da yin jenyo ba shiba la ngashi che dipa la jawa nomba sanje be to ndun ta to moyo ngwa che so la pa ju ma she nyo be nya pa li la du bi to genjo la sha san ro shi shon ju de se she wa so dian je to dong ba ni gong ba to junga che ba che dipa la so nyambo gen de she be to ji go ne di sha.
So page number 10, first paragraph. If we do not wish to suffer, this is a sign that we must abandon the cause of suffering, which is negative actions. To feel regret for the harmful actions we have committed in the past is the power of repentance. To vow never to repeat them, even at the cost of one's life, is the power of restraint. So that's what we said is turning one's back on the fault or the promise. To take refuge and generate bodhicitta is the power of support or the basis. To meditate on emptiness, recite special dharanis and mantras and so on is the power of the antidote. Thus, we should confess our misdeeds properly by means of these four powers. So in the really kind of broad understanding of this, the power of the antidote, or here it's given as the antidotal action, actually any virtuous karma that we dedicate to purification, that can be an antidote, really.
And
similarly, vast accumulations can happen from seemingly small acts. If we give just a morsel of food to an insect with a motivation of bodhicitta, it can become a vast accumulation of merit. And so you can see this explained very clearly in the Lamrim Chemo, the great stages of the path, and also the Lamrim Tingbo, the middling stages of the path. So of course, if we can give more, giving more is better, right? But even if what we can give is only something limited, something small, on the basis of that vast motivation or mind, right, it still becomes a great accumulation.
Oya ta rowa samba de la cheba na toma pa de che da ge shon ju de se shi zhuo shi bi ga ri che de ta de sen che tong che ji de ma da la ma ma de so shi che ta pa ne so wa da bo.
So number 3, the practice of offering to harmful influences. Offer tormas and make heartfelt prayers saying, since you support my training in bodhicitta, you are very kind. Please continue, cause all the suffering of sentient beings to ripen upon me.
다 근데 유보를 또 말아봐. 다 토마토야 될다 니빠 체가요 그지도 니빠 맥이 당한 말다만 요청으로 왔어.
So the practice of offering the torma, right? For those not familiar, this is the ritual cake. So let's go again. So the practice of offering the torma, this is given from the point of view of somebody of a higher capacity and somebody of more a beginning capacity.
다 할래비 또 전부 니빠 전부지 다 그게 열때 전부 세 도와 요기지나. 바제도 된데 쉬나. 내가도 된데 용화 다또 코로 보게 원다고 요나. 다 저로서 내가 잡아라 때네. 나 쇼주지 세도
So for the more experienced practitioner, right, when he or she is experiencing an obstacle such as some sort of difficult situation, a sickness, and so forth, they may think, right, because of this illness, because of this obstacle, I've become more resolute to develop my practices of love, compassion, bodhicitta, and so forth. So because this difficult condition is benefiting my practice, please give me more difficult conditions. So this is the torma offering for the more experienced practitioner. And so there's also many histories, right, how from transforming the illness and so forth into this kind of a very significant training for the mind, it is actually able to purify the causes of the illness and people have been healed, right? So you see a lot of those stories in the Buddhist literature. But if we're not a person of high capacity, if we're a beginner or of more limited capacity, we make the torma, the offering of the ritual cake, to the obstructing spirits, asking them not to harm us, not to obstruct our practice, and maybe to go away. If we are not able to do this, offer tormas, cultivate loving kindness and compassion, and command them by saying, through whatever I do to assist you now and in the longer term, do not obstruct my dharma practice. So number 4, offer tormas to the Dharma protectors and request them to pacify any circumstances that might hinder Dharma practice and to create favorable circumstances instead. In order to integrate one's immediate circumstances onto the path, one should do as the root text says. Whatever you encounter, apply the practice. Should you experience intense suffering as a result of illness, harmful influences, encountering an enemy, and so forth, consider how these are innumerable cases of such suffering in the world and feel compassion for all those affected. Draw all this suffering onto your own or consider how this harm assists in your training of bodhicitta. So when we have those hindrances and those difficulties, right, one of the best ways to sort of use those is to think, oh, it's so terrible, right? Other sentient beings experience these too, or even worse, and use that as a way to kind of build up our love and compassion, right?
So
we are just one person, right? And therefore rather insignificant if we think about all those similar sufferings being experienced by those hundreds, thousands, countless sentient beings. So that can give us perspective.
다 던지지나 하고서 다 될 돈에 있는 녀라시야. 지도 다 소소 강에 때 강기 고쳐 봐. 쇼 메타 매번 로얄 될도 쇼스나 원니 받지 못이래스.
So that is really actually also a practice of Tonglen, right? Of taking on the suffering of others and giving away the happiness. And this is a very powerful practice.
돈에 거랑 이내라요 좀 뭐뭐 요아래. 대목이 다 라쇼 된디 강에 강기 고쳐 봐. 차 넣어서네 다 봐.
And so Tonglen, of course, it has different ways that it can be applied, some easier than others. In the beginning stages, often we think about future sufferings, taking those causes into the suffering we experience now as a way of purifying those future sufferings. So that is the easier application of this practice.
So it's
the most skillful way really to transform obstacles into the path is by using the difficult circumstances as a way to strengthen our practice of love and compassion. And so as a way of kind of increasing our determination in this practice, right, we can have the sense of proportion of our own happiness versus the happiness of others. If we think of ourselves as a person externally, we're one person compared to a vast mountain, a vast heap of all sentient beings. Ale, yabuko masonti. Kare segire. Okay, so I understand. So Geshe is trying to, because if we put ourself there, right, our sense of self-importance might make it seem like that one person is like a mountain, even when we compare it to other sentient beings. So what he's suggesting you do here is just take a stranger or maybe an acquaintance, someone you don't know very well, and have that one person standing there and have yourself together with all sentient beings standing on the other side. And this will sort of lead to this awareness how one person is not nearly as significant as all those sentient beings. Yeah. Because if we do the perspective just looking at ourselves compared to all sentient beings, because of our self-cherishing attitude, that one person is inflated into something really big, even compared to that whole mountain of sentient beings. Yeah. But if it's another being as one compared to the many, then that's not such a big deal because that other being is not us. So like, whatever, we don't have that self-cherishing attitude, right, for that other being. Yeah, so this is kind of, I guess it's Geshe's kind of mind hack to develop that kind of sense of proportion for one sentient being versus the remaining all sentient beings. Yeah, and you can do this meditation in a way that kind of what you can get your head around, so you compare 1 to 100 or 1 to all of the people that you see around, just the sense of proportion of the one versus the many and how the communal good is the most important. So we are going to the we are going to yeah, Geshe is really giving me the sauce today. So we are on chapter 12 of the 400 verses. So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, well, we'll know when Geshe reads it anyway. We're on the, yeah, so we're on 284 for those of you who are following. Chapter 12, 284. Yeah, gubare.
Shino ngepa kona na yuje chila gomba de teda gomba mebai duje chila jiban jos.
So 284. Childish beings are certainly only familiar with that which involves them. Because of unfamiliarity, they fear that which extricates them.
Oh, there. Ta shino shiva seri shiva soso shivo.
Yeah.
Semba jachushu.
So childish here really just means an ordinary being. And how is an ordinary being defined? Just that narrow way of thinking, right? Not that vast way of thinking. Yeah. So childish here, Geshe is just saying it's figurative, right? We could also have childish in a Buddhist sense as somebody who thinks only about samsara and the activities of samsara. This would be a childish person. And someone who thinks of beyond samsara and liberation, that would be somebody who is not childish. So the problem with this childish attitude, right, is that by paying most attention to those samsaric activities and putting most of our worry and concern into samsara, what do? We create a deeper and deeper habituation to samsara or cyclic existence, which keeps us in samsara for even longer and longer and longer. That's the problem. And that's why it's relatively easier for us to think about samsaric things, because when we talk about love, compassion, especially emptiness, things like that, it's really hard to kind of get those in our mind and to focus on them. Why? Because we lack that habituation. So when you try to exhort beings to strive towards liberation, to strive to solve this problem of samsara, of cyclic existence, to develop a love and compassion that is really universal, and to challenge this self-cherishing or self-centered attitude, what you often get is a resistance, right? It's very difficult for people to want to do that. That's because of lack of habituation. Yeah. So for some folks, talking about liberation, talking about reducing self-cherishing and so forth, this actually can be something rather than encouraging. They hear it as negative, or they feel fearful, or they have like an aversion to it. Yes. So they fear that which extricates them. So in other words, they fear that which is going to get them free. Yeah, that's what's being said here.
This way.
Yeah.
다 빼나 바차 여기 이나 요 바차 여기 이나 코토바 메기 이나 보고 주시다 근데 마지막이 이나 요 콜 바차 요나 제왕님의 바차 되로 어떻게 계시셔 저거 이나 콜 배도 지금 바차 세고요.
But so there are those who fear that which extricates them, right? They fear that which is going to get them free. But there are other beings, sometimes even small children, that they would hear something like this and they immediately have a liking or have an interest. This is because of those bakchak, those imprints or those latencies of what is positive within the mind. Look, ale, loso, look, chung, donda. Look, izio. Yeah. So there's a story of Milarepa, Lord Milarepa, who was meditating in a cave. And as he was meditating in this cave, a young shepherd came towards him. And so this shepherd was sort of coming to where Milarepa was meditating, and Milarepa asked him, like, why are you here? right? And the boy said to him, because I am looking for my sheep. And then he said, why are you looking for the sheep? And he said, because I am a shepherd. And then Milarepa asked him, where is that I that is labeled as the shepherd? Where is that self that is labeled as the shepherd? Is it in your head? Is it in your body? Is it in your hand? Where is that I that is a shepherd? So the I'm a shepherd, that feeling of I'm a shepherd, where exactly is that I that is feeling that? Check this carefully. So this was a child, right, who hadn't really studied or anything, but he thought about this, and when he got home before he slept, he would think, like, I have this idea of I'm a shepherd, but where is this I exactly, and what is it exactly? So he started to think about this.
And so the
next day he went and he wanted to talk to Milarepa, and he said, I thought a lot about where is the I that feels that it is a shepherd? Where is this I from I'm a shepherd? And I wasn't able to figure out where it was, right? So he shared that experience. So, he contemplated this for one day, for 2 days, and for longer and longer periods of time. And eventually he was able to realize shunyata, to realize profound emptiness. So that's why we talk about the importance, right, of maybe doing these seemingly little things that are virtuous, that help us to gather merit, because it is through that which we establish these bakchak, these positive latencies or imprints, and those can ripen at any time, right? We even hear the stories of those who were birds hearing the Dharma, then in the next life they were able to realize things more easily. So none of that effort is wasted.
Then
so we the story of Lodru Tempa, who he was a bird that would sit outside Vasubandhu's hut. And Vasubandhu would be reciting a lot of texts. So for part of the day, the bird would just be there kind of listening passively. And the other part, he would be asleep. So in the next life, he was reborn as a scholar monk. And it is said that that particular text, he was able to learn the first half very easily, but he struggled with the second half. So if even a bird can benefit from that type of imprint, then of that positive imprint, then definitely as human beings, we are able to create a lot of those positive causes. So really, we want to kind of direct our habituation and familiarize ourselves with love, compassion, bodhicitta, and emptiness, with the understanding that as we place these firm imprints within our mind, eventually we will come to a result. So it's His Holiness says that realization may be something that seems far off and a little bit difficult, but with habituation, establishing a firm, stable, abiding imprint is definitely possible. And we also know the story of the Buddha, right, who even when he was a bodhisattva in the lower realm, because of exerting himself to put those imprints of compassion in his mind stream, seeing that suffering brought forth that realization of compassion very quickly. Yeah. And so we also know the so we know also the story of a Sangha, right, who was meditating, and it was seeing that dog, right, with the infested wound that brought forth that kind of, it's seemingly spontaneous realization of compassion, but that was that imprint ripening.
다 던딜 따는 니지세 가침보레 시다티 랭엠바 메바자 간디지레 디테스스다 하고 왔어.
And so we see how important compassion is, and also with what we spoke today about today, how powerful an antidote, right, a purification compassion can be as well. So thank you. That concludes our discussion for today. So let us do a dedication, and then for those of you folks who need to get on, I know it's Thanksgiving weekend. Thank you for coming regardless, but you may be busy. So if you need to get on with your day after the dedication, please do. But if you'd like to stay for questions, you are most welcome. Yes. So we want these powerful dedication prayers, right? Because we talked about these merits we accumulated. We want those merits to be stable and abiding so that they become those powerful imprints. Shangjo semjo rinpoche maje banam jejo ji jeva nyamba meba yang kone konde bewa jo tongni tawa rinpoche maje banam jejo ji Jeva nyamba meba yang gone gondo bewa shu jambe bao jeda jamba no gondo Zangpo deyan dejen deda kungi jesu dalo je gewa deda tamshe radamo desu shebe gewa tamshe ge ngawa kala chodu ngapa de dagi gewe zawa digo yon Zangpo jeje radamo wa. Through the roots of virtue amassed by myself and others, may all beings be able to develop deep roots of love, of compassion within their mind streams. Through the merits we have accumulated, may those beings, humans and animals possessing evil thoughts or harmful thoughts towards others, may these evil thoughts be cleared away, and may they bring forth kindness. May the sun of happiness shine on all 6 types of beings within samsara without exception. Through these merits, may all of the wars, conflicts, propelled by those who are evildoers with unwholesome minds, may these be cleared away. May this suffering cease. May all of those who strive to benefit, to be kind, and to help sentient beings, may their aspirations be realized to perfection. So we'll pause there. So any questions today? The folks at here or the folks at home? Go ahead.
Could you elaborate a little bit on a lot of times we talk about relative and ultimate level and relative and ultimate bodhicitta. And when you read about Sambhogakaya, it seems like in the different layers of Nirmanakaya, Dharmakaya, and Sambhogakaya, it's not entirely clear what is that. Why is there Sambhogakaya? What does that entail?
So Sam, I understand the two questions, but maybe I want to seek clarity from you about how these two questions relate to each other. So what's the connection that you're seeing between this relative and the ultimate and these three different kayas?
Yeah.
Or is it two separate questions? It's okay if it's two separate ones. I just thought maybe
it's the same question. It seems to be, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, but it seems to me that Nirmanakaya alludes to the ultimate level. I'm sorry, Dharmakaya alludes to the ultimate level, and Nirmanakaya to the relative level of existence, which is also reflected in the emanation of the actual Buddha Shakyamuni versus, for example, Samantrapata. But it's not, and I have a sense of it, but it's not entirely clear to me.
Yeah. Okay.
Why is there Sambhogakaya?
Why? Okay. Yes. Okay. So yeah. Now I see the connection, and now I also see the two parts of the question. So let me put this to Geshe.
Yeah.
So the dundang jangju gisem dang kunso jangju gisem chik lagire duas. And then also dundam dang kunso yewa chetang kandes chik res di chua tambodi. Then nganso kusum dinso yere roa choku dang longku dang trulku sum dinso yere roa. Then dinso samlo tangna then choku di dundam giku dabo chagire dua. Ane trulku dang longku di konso kunzo giku dabo rebes. Ane tama di choku dang trulku kare chene gogires ko sebo chene hako gitu sine lungtu digi chawadang kare chene gogires ko semla sebo yomare segire.
Lungketiga.
Oh, lungku.
Lungketiga.
Oh.
Oh, de dembore. Ta de tangi tere de akorola vanu de dembore was. Ke ina chikedo lungkedo tukeni de kedupi kesena de res.
Ane chokudi. So firstly, Sam, Geshe is saying that you are correct in thinking that the Dharmakaya, the truth body, is more connected to the ultimate, and that the Sambhogakaya, the enjoyment body, and the Nirmanakaya, the emanation body, these are more connected to the relative. So that's a correct understanding.
Oh, ta kazudo kenjo skala kazudo tedo nire me da ya ju ya res kala je chures.
Agi?
Sunji kenjo chikejo gende kejo kangala kazudo tedo sa me da ya momo ya res.
And actually there's a way to divide the three jewels of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Each of those three jewels can be talked about in a relative sense as well as in an ultimate sense. So there is a connection here.
This one? Oh, ta what did you this way?
No, this.
Oh, that's ya tsu ni do kangan jawa do so dan to ale. Ta lukasa karachini yung gar jala bahina.
And so that is related also to the principal cause of those particular bodies, whether it is the accumulation of merit or the accumulation of wisdom. So Geshe is not saying directly, Sam, but he's giving you a pointer there in terms of how to think about it. And then to the other part of your question, which is, what is the function of this Sambhogakaya, the enjoyment body? Why do we need it?
This one? Oh, that is what Pejano the Trinity to see what you are, that is say.
Yes. And so the reasoning actually is something that up until now, Geshe said, looking at the scriptures, it's not something that he's seen completely kind of explained actually.
This one? Oh, ta ina yo ta koropoge karseka ganzo. 손지 코로게 다 머니와 그 디네라 이 가디나 제데 드게 하고서라와 디체다 다 로주도 녀레 강가 다 까와 몸보 거네 갈레자니 요한 와스 다 요한 리부터 비가라요 가디나 버게 제데 드라게 네스지 하고서라와 용기요 하레스.
But let's trace it back to before the being achieves enlightenment, right? How does the being achieve enlightenment? They're studying and practicing, they're accumulating this equivalent of 3 eons of merit, all for the purpose of helping others. So if they've done such kind of a vast practice and accumulation as a cause, then the result has to be similarly vast. And the way that they benefit beings has to be vast and diverse. So perhaps the Sambhogakaya, the enjoyment body, is connected with that, because all the Buddhas are doing is abiding for the benefit of beings.
아니 코 마토 바등에 다 하고서라와 땅에 예대주는 되게 그렇게 도착이 되네요.
So the Buddhas have this promise, right, that until samsara is empty, I will continually work to benefit sentient beings.
하고서라와 다 대코를 들어가서도 말했더니 리브땡이네 타투일 토게들라 곧 사모지 이사 연도 돈도 매이자 다 손주서 봐봐 기복 동자레스.
So because the result from that vast motivation is something that is particularly profound, right? It has many facets, and the most profound facets of that enlightenment cannot be seen by ordinary beings. They can only be seen by Arya or realized beings. And for that reason, we have the Sambhogakaya. So it illustrates that in part. Did that answer your question, Sam?
Yes, thank you.
Great, okay. So Geshe said this is his logical thinking about why this is the case, but actually it's a bit mysterious because the texts don't explain this kind of so pointedly.
다 대통토 매이자 다 손지 선바 지볼 코로지 되던 그야 말와스 다 요절 그거야 아니 뜻이야.
The Nirmanakaya is a lot easier to understand, right? Because the Buddhas labored in study and practice to get this result, which is benefiting all sentient beings. Sambhogakaya is not enough, because then you're just benefiting the Arya beings who are already pretty advanced, but you want to benefit all sentient beings, so you have to appear in a form that can be seen by beings of the world. So you have the Nirmanakaya, or the emanation body, right? This one is easier to understand, isn't it? Yeah. So that's why we have all these emanation bodies, all these holy beings in the world, really. Yeah. And so another topic which Geshe would like to touch on in a future teaching, perhaps, is the 5 unique characteristics of the Sambhogakaya. So we're limited for time, so he's not going to give you all of them today, but he'll give you a taster, one of them. One of the features of the Sambhogakaya is that it only teaches the Mahayana Dharma. It only teaches the Dharma of the great vehicle. Oh, the second characteristic is that those who are the disciples of the Sambhogakaya are only Arya realized beings and bodhisattvas. The third is a definite timing, which is that Sambhogakaya form. Geshe is giving all of them, it seems. So that Sambhogakaya form is abiding until samsara is empty, in accordance with that promise.
Yeah.
The fourth is that the body of this Sambhogakaya Buddha has all of the various marks and signs of an enlightened being in their most kind of prominent aspect, so in a very visible aspect. The fifth one, Geshe said, is related to the abode, and he's not sure exactly if he's remembering this correctly, but it's related to the abode. Okmin, Chatsangwa Okmin la Degere. And those Pure Lands are all Geshe thinks all of those Pure Lands are kind of within the broader realm called Akanishta, but this he's not sure on, so he has to check. So these are 5 characteristics of the Sambhoga Kaya, of the enjoyment body. So that might help you to conceptualize that a bit as well. So I see, Dave, you have your hand up. Are there some questions?
Yeah, we have a question from YouTube. How can one know that one has realized shunyata? What are the signs?
Ale, konso nga shunyata di nga tompa ni di ngane toksons kandes hakogires sen kareyeresa. Yeah. Sabatono. Yeah. So Geshe wants to know if the person is asking about the direct realization of emptiness or a valid cognition of it, because it will be different. Maybe we should just say both, unless the person answers right away.
Yes.
Yeah. Niga chichena drona yagamanjo.
Pena ngazo dale to ngazo dale to boachina.
Yeah.
Atumanya lojo sabashi nola sabashi na goja tumanya ineche tosona.
Yeah.
Ta nojin decha traboshesa kundo traboshesa decha pedo mendo yamari kundo mendo yamari deji chichene neba. Ngazo tanda deji legede.
Yeah.
Sagetsege jiwaro was.
Yeah.
Deji chene pedo.
Yeah. So in terms of the kind of initial understanding of emptiness, not the direct realization. So let's be clear here. One of the ways that one can know that one has reached this point is, as a beginner, one is investigating the teachings on emptiness, and one is meditating and meditating and meditating. And then finally, one develops what one thinks is a valid understanding. How does one check that? One's anger is far less. One is less irascible and moody. One's attachment is far less. So we can posit that one's understanding has been meaningful through seeing a decrease in the afflictions. And actually, even at this level, it is said that the afflictions might still be present, but they are not able to harm one in a very prominent way, right? The afflictions are actually kind of like paralyzed a little bit. And why is that? It's because the afflictions arise in relations to objects, right? But with this understanding of emptiness, one understands that that object that one has experienced the affliction in relation to, it doesn't exist in the solid way that it appears to.
Yeah, and
so those afflictions, right, are related very much to the way that they are perceiving their object. So once shunyata or emptiness is realized, right, then the mistaken way that they're seeing that object is much less prominent, and similarly, the affliction is greatly reduced.
And
we can see this in our own experience too, because when we get angry, when we get irritated about something, for example, we know that it's not really the side of the object that's irritating it so much as our own exaggeration that's upsetting us and making us irrational, right? When the misperception of that object has been addressed with that understanding of emptiness, the basis for that anger and so forth arising is greatly reduced, isn't it?
Yeah.
So during our meditation session, to get to this point of understanding, during our meditation session, it's really important to kind of try to find that object of negation and see that there is nothing inherently existent. There is no pinpointable solid existence there at all. And then out of the meditation session, right, to apply that understanding as we relate it to our experiences. Yeah. And we'll see actually our meditation session and our outside of the meditation session, the real world, if you will, that these begin to benefit each other. The meditations that we do, these inform our real world experiences and interactions. And then we learn from those real world experiences and interactions in a way that is able to inform and improve our meditation.
So we want to
get rid of all of our problems, right? That's the ultimate goal. But as this provisional goal, right, from this initial valid understanding, the problems are greatly reduced, and then we know that we're in the right direction. The direct realization of emptiness, karma, and affliction is said to be cleared away. So it's like burning a seed, right? The seed is no longer able to bring forth the sprout of samsara. So that's on a whole other level, isn't it? And somebody asked Dharmakirti, like, when is the end of samsara going to be seen? And he said, when all of the seeds of karma have been burnt and not able to bring forth a sprout. In other words, when emptiness has been realized. So the end of samsara will be seen when the door to selflessness has been opened. And why is that? It's because as this emptiness is understood, then the negative karmas that are leading to the various realms of samsara, right? These are no longer being accumulated. So at a certain point, samsara becomes paralyzed as well, right? It stops turning. Yeah. So that's the great benefit of realizing that. And Geshe said, in a way, also, it's like that free card of negative karma, because emptiness, the direct realization of emptiness is that thing which can kind of just purify all of that. So any other questions?
That's it from
Facebook
YouTube. That's it. Yeah, okay. Actually, yes, the request was for direct.
Direct. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we covered both, yeah. Right? So it's okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
So go ahead, Annie.
I was wondering if Geshe could explain dedication, because I feel like sometimes when I say it, it doesn't have enough meaning. I'm sort of like glibly saying something, and I know that it's really important, but I need some help on that.
So ngawe munlam kyordu samsam sorwa dapo levgyo mare duwa sorwa nganso netsu dawo chi pa lageres matok semla ngane gyowa drogyo mares tene nganso ngawe munlam ngane pentok che tubia kandes chik sogoresa.
Ya dan deal nganso dise tunture ten ta mayong ba de chi shogi lele zo sho. So no le ina.
Yeah.
Chi lele zo sho yo so no to.
Yeah.
Hakoso.
Yeah.
Ana giba chi serji ba ga taro ta so no to na.
So when we do the dedications in a setting like this, right, they're necessarily quite quick because we're limited for time, right? Folks' time is limited. But when you're at home, actually, you should firstly recite the dedication prayer slowly, then contemplate its meanings, and also, right, consult the texts and other teachings you've had about the reason of why we need to dedicate. If you bring forth the reason and the contemplation into it, then it will become more meaningful. And think those holy beings who, I have so much faith in the amazing activities they do. Part of their ability to do that, it came from not just the merits they accumulated, but the amazing dedications that they made for those merits. And also, really familiarize yourselves with the stories of these holy beings, of these realized beings. How did they practice? How did they dedicate? And maybe some of those dedications will inspire you.
Yeah. So
but you're pointing to a larger problem, which is that for those of us who are, reciting practices regularly, it can come to a point where we're reciting the words without really integrating the meaning. And that kind of goes to when we talked about the Deva Putra Mara kind of shooting those arrows of distraction, right? It's a little bit like that. It feels a little bit like that sometimes. So think like, like it's not coming forth, right? My motivation and so forth seems dry, and it's that Deva Putra Mara. He wants to keep all of these beings in the desire realm, and he doesn't want to get us out. So he's kind of shooting those arrows to distract me so that this doesn't feel meaningful, right? But it is meaningful.
Yes, thank you. Sometimes I feel like I want to do dedication during the day when I'm in post meditation, because I've managed to avert speaking in a way that I regretted. But it feels like the nature of practice is mixing now a little bit to be longer. And sometimes I feel like the meditation practice is sometimes less deep than the regular day. So it seems to be a transition period. So I was wondering about how to work with that dedication in that way.
Yeah, nganso yang samsam nganso di nyamlin chedu dene samsam chik nganso mitse nangla nganso gom jaya gi tutsu di ke champure sine ngune tutsu ke chewa nyamlin gi tutsu ke chewa nganso gom maja pe kavala nganso midang keche shegi res perna nganso di kare pango gidu selbo chane nganso migewa denso malap denso chatsangwa yarge drone dene chichena gom jape jela gewa ngowa yores ine yang nganso mitse nanglo la gi tutsu di yang gewa ngowa yoresa. So of course, like the daily life is the more important thing, and when we're successful in doing something like that, we should dedicate the merits, at least mentally. Remember, the meditation practice is to develop those minds so that they're there when we need them in daily life, actually. Yes. So in the Heart Sutra, right, it talks about like no meditation, or sorry, in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, it talks about no meditation. That's what it's saying, right? Because like once we meditate and have that mind, then we can use that in our daily life. So we meditate because we're not able to access these minds when we need them out of the session. So one of the ways we can kind of contemplate our daily life practice, right, outside of the meditation session is like the Kadampa Geshis who had the different colored stones, right? And one type of stone helped them count the negative deeds. The other ones helped them count the positive deeds, right? So this can be something very beneficial. Yeah, and so then when there were more of the positive deeds that they counted with the stones, then you can like have a nice cup of tea or something, or treat yourself a little bit and praise yourself, saying I did well. Hopefully people won't think you're talking to yourself that you lost your marbles, but that can be something beneficial. And so sometimes the Kadampa Geshe, if the negative stones were more, like he would scold himself, right? And there's a story, actually, his neighbors were like, who the heck is he talking to, right? They really thought that he had lost his marbles. If you continue in this way, right, you're going to waste your life. So you must kind of improve and step back from those negative actions. Yes. Yeah. So these are some ways to kind of integrate the meditation and the post-meditation experiences, right, according to the lamas. I think I see one more hand. Is it Manoshi?
Yes, hello.
Go ahead. Hi.
Hi. I was thinking about what Geshe was saying about the 4 opponent powers. And I know we can do it formally when we see that we've made a mistake, or we can do it when we're doing, say, Vajrasattva practice or something like that. But it suddenly occurred to me, would it be appropriate, as any virtuous action or any virtuous practice can be an antidote to the 4 opponent powers, would it be appropriate before we sit down to do a session, like the whole session, and consider that as the whole session as an antidote? bring to mind negativities, but we're wanting, as Geshe said, we're wanting to purify not only just one or two negativities, we were trying to purify all our negativities from beginning of this time. So could we use like each session as part and put that into the framework of a 4 opponent powers?
So to have that motivation of at the beginning of the session to make the cultivation of that session a completion of the 4 opponent powers. Did that
Correct,
understand?
correct.
Yeah. Nganso namgin di nyambo topji din so tene nganso dorje sempa kola peshe tangi yore ma to je nganso no tru chambo chik shona tene nganso nyamlen chegi yore si nganso kadi ine di pa jango gire duas tene nganso perna gomtun kariyana nyamlen chegi tu so kariyana di nyambo topji drona digire base perna nganso di tun go tsu be kabala nganso di QSMD kunlong dang chena dabo chigere is digire besa. Yeah, so absolutely. And in fact, that's an excellent way. If you're looking for a way to enhance your practice, informing the regular practice session with an application of the 4 opponent powers. Yes, that's very useful. Yeah. And it's very important to integrate everything we do into purification. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Manoshi. Yes, go ahead.
Is there any books like the story of Milarepa?
Yeah.
We read Milarepa's life story.
Yeah.
What stories do you guys recommend to instill the want and desire to practice?
Did people hear the question? So the question was about which kind of stories, like the story of Milarepa, are going to inspire the want and desire to practice. What other stories could we recommend? Nanso di J Milarepa di chik sung arwa that in a young semchu kea dang nyamlinche chea duba chi kea la deb dang namtar jenda kare apo yeresa. Kebu tamba gidrung den sorwa J Milarepa yere de jenda didabo jenda yere de.
Agenda yeah, that manda yor was chiton da manda yor derwa. Sunjigology mombo yor.
Yep.
Ani tal lama kangi lobe kangi ka korology yor logi jitana. Ose shia mombo yor is.
Lama kanga ta pekashila.
En kalse kasta lobe inye na uchajana. Aliwe nyambo.
Yeah.
Ana papa tome.
Yes. Oh. Yeah, so Geshe said that, I mean, there's many of these books. A lot of them are translated, not all. So just say that as a warning. But for example, Lama Tsongkhapa's biography is available now. This can be very moving. Also, the Buddha's life story and the stories of the Buddha's previous lives, the Jataka stories. So those are also available now. Geshe said also in other scriptures, you have nice kind of long narratives of beings like Vasubandhu and Asanga and so forth. So these can all be very inspiring for our practice. So Geshe is mentioning a sutra called the Do Zoling, and I'm sorry, I don't know how to translate this for you. So I will look this up, and hopefully next session I'll share it with you if I don't remind me. But there's a sutra of, I think it's the Buddha's lives. I think it might even be available on 84,000, but I just can't remember the English name for this. Zoling. So this is a history of many of the previous lives of the Buddha. It might be a sutra rendering the Jataka tales, actually. It's what it sounds like. Oh, yeah. No, sorry. So it is a sutra. There's different sutras where the Jataka tales are contained. So this is a sutra containing, Geshe said specifically one he remembered was where the Buddha in his previous lifetime was a bird and he was benefiting all of the birds and so forth. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So some of you may be familiar with this story. So there was this kind of large community of birds, and they were located not too far from the king's palace. And the kingdom was undergoing difficulties and disharmony and so forth. And so the king would often observe these birds, and he would see how one of the birds kind of had a leadership role. And on the basis of that, the bird community was able to abide in harmony. There was less suffering and so forth. And so, of course, that bird was the one who was the Buddha when he was a bodhisattva, right? So Geshe said this is one of the stories in this
아니
volume. Which is
잡을 때
nice.
렘보 할레비 비다고 야보지도 왔을 때 어떤 렘보티가 다 잡을 저런 내지 치고 그거나 아니 제 야보도 뽕 야보서 가래스 가지고 자란 거
Ale, ale,
보로
ale,
보도 놀어
ale, ale, ale. Sulausung.
렘보티 갈레트 갈레
Yeah, and so the one of the ministers of the king was also very wise, and he said, you know, if you want the people in the kingdom to be more harmonious and happier, you have to improve their conditions. So just like the birds have this beautiful kind of meadow with nice water and things, you have to improve the conditions within the kingdom, and that will contribute to the harmony. So there's a kind of a whole dialogue that unfolds like that.
다 돼지 간가 그거 샤 돼지가 밀리기 와서 왔었네 그거 어찌니 데이터 간가 샤왕은 jellatine 슈아레스
Yeah, so the story begins by describing, right, like what the cause was for all of those sentient beings to abide in greater harmony. So there, we have many such stories in the Buddhist tradition. And also the stories of the various like Kadampa Geshes, right, like Ben-gun Gyal and so forth. These can be very useful. So thank you very much. So if there's nothing else, we'll leave it here. And for those here, enjoy your long weekend. And for those for whom it's not a long weekend, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Take care, everybody.